Imagine you are Zenobia. The desert sun once gleamed off your crown as you ruled an empire from Egypt to Anatolia. Now that same sun burns against the chains binding your wrists. Your palace in Palmyra is silent. Your armies are gone. You stand before Emperor Aurelian as Rome demands your death. But instead of an execution order, he leans closer and says, "Death would be too kind." For the woman who dared to challenge Rome. What fate awaited the queen who almost broke an empire? As you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's return to the moment Rome chose cruelty over mercy. The gold shackles bit into Zenobia's wrists, their weight almost unbearable despite their beauty. A slave walked beside her, helping to support the burden of the jewel-encrusted robes that hung from her shoulders. Ahead, Emperor Aurelian's magnificent chariot gleamed in the morning sun, pulled by 4 stately stags. Behind her stretched the endless line of captives, her loyal soldiers with hands bound tightly, her advisors in chains, the remains of her once mighty Palmyrene Empire reduced to this humiliating spectacle. Rome's streets were packed with citizens craning their necks for a glimpse of the infamous desert queen who had dared to challenge Roman power. The triumph had begun at dawn and would continue until dusk, a grand parade featuring exotic animals, enemy chariots, and mountains of looted treasure. But it was Zenobia herself who drew the loudest jeers and occasional expressions of pity, the Saracen usurper who had styled herself as a new Cleopatra. Only months ago, she had ruled an empire stretching from Egypt to Anatolia. Her word had been law from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates. Kings and governors had bowed before her throne in Palmyra's magnificent palace. Now she walked in chains through the streets of Rome, a spectacle for the empire she had nearly brought to its knees. The Romans had been victorious after bitter fighting, besieging her in her beloved Palmyra, before capturing her as she attempted to flee across the Euphrates to seek Persian aid. Now, instead of ruling a cultured court filled with scholars and philosophers, she marched in Aurelian's triumph. The crowd's roar grew deafening as she approached the forum. Through sweat-stung eyes, Zenobia caught glimpses of the marble temples and monuments celebrating Rome's countless victories. She had almost added Palmyra's name to the list of empires that had broken Roman power. Almost. The thought of how close she had come made the golden chains feel even heavier. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light across the spectacle, Zenobia kept her eyes fixed forward. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not even when she heard the crowd's cruel laughter. Not even when she saw her captured generals' faces twisted in despair. Not even when she wondered if death might have been kinder than this parade of humiliation. But Emperor Aurelian had decided that death was too kind a fate for the woman who had nearly split his empire in two. And Zenobia was about to discover exactly what the Emperor of Rome had planned for her instead. 5 years earlier, Zenobia stood on the palace balcony overlooking Palmyra, the jewel of the Syrian desert. Merchants' caravans wound through the streets below, bringing spices from India, silks from China, and goods from every corner of the known world. The city's colonnaded avenues and magnificent temples gleamed in the amber light of sunset, monuments to Palmyra's prosperity as the crossroads of East and West. In the power vacuum that followed her husband Odaenathus's death, Zenobia had seized control. She declared herself regent for her young son Vabalithus, determined to maintain stability in the region. The Roman Empire was disintegrating, torn apart by civil wars, usurpations, invasions, and economic collapse. Zenobia had created a Palmyrene Empire that incorporated most of the Roman Near East, from Anatolia to Egypt, ruling her multilingual and multi-ethnic subjects with fairness and tolerance. "My queen," said Longinus, her trusted advisor and the renowned philosopher, approaching with a scroll in hand. "News from Rome. Emperor Claudius Gothicus is dead. They say plague took him." Zenobia's dark eyes flashed with calculation. "And who rules Rome now?" "A general named Aurelian. The legions have proclaimed him emperor." "Another soldier on the throne," Zenobia said, gazing out at her beautiful city. "How many does this make in the last decade?" "Too many to count, my queen," Longinus replied with a slight smile. "Rome tears itself apart while Palmyra grows stronger." Zenobia nodded, contemplating her city's position. Located in Syria, about 130 miles northeast of Damascus, Palmyra had prospered under Roman control. Sitting at the crossroads between Rome's Mediterranean world and the great empires of Asia, it had become a center of immense strategic and economic importance. As an obligatory stopover for caravans crossing the deserts, Palmyra's wealth gave its rulers the means to beautify their city with magnificent buildings, like its Arch of Triumph and impressive theater. "And what of our expansion?" Zenobia asked, turning from the view. "Egypt will soon be ours," Longinus assured her. "General Zabdas reports that the Roman forces there are weak and divided, and with Egypt's grain, we control Rome's food supply." Zenobia smiled, remembering her childhood dreams of greatness. Born to nobility, educated in 4 languages, she had prepared her entire life for this moment. As the daughter of a noble Palmyrene family, she had received an extensive education that made her fluent not only in her native Aramaic, but also in Egyptian, Greek, and Latin. Now she would use that knowledge to build an empire that could rival Rome itself. "Then we continue as planned," she said firmly. "While Rome deals with its latest emperor, we will secure the East. My son will inherit an empire, not a mere city." As the sun disappeared behind the desert horizon, Zenobia made her choice. Palmyra would no longer be content to exist in Rome's shadow. The desert's daughter would reach for a crown of her own. In 270, Zenobia dispatched her general Zabdas to claim Egypt, Rome's richest province. With support from their Egyptian ally Timagenes, the Palmyrenes secured a decisive victory. To solidify her position in Egypt, Zenobia claimed descent from Cleopatra, connecting herself to Egypt's glorious past. Leading her troops as a true warrior queen, she then marched into Anatolia, defeating Roman forces as far west as Ancyra. Through military skill and clever propaganda, Zenobia conquered Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, creating an empire independent of Rome. In the grand audience chamber of her palace, Zenobia received ambassadors from across her newly expanded domains. She sat on a throne elevated above the court, wearing Persian-inspired royal garments and the diadem of sovereignty. Her 10-year-old son Vabalathus sat on a smaller throne beside her, watching and learning as his mother governed an empire. "The Roman garrisons in Antioch have surrendered without a fight," reported General Zabdas, kneeling before her. "The city welcomed our forces as liberators." Zenobia nodded with satisfaction. "And the Roman officials?" "They have fled back to their crumbling empire," Zabdas replied with a smile. "The East is ours, from the Nile to the mountains of Anatolia." The court erupted in celebration, but Zenobia raised a hand for silence. "What news of Emperor Aurelian?" Longinus stepped forward. "He battles the Germanic tribes on the northern frontiers. Rome's armies are stretched thin across too many borders." "Then we have chosen our moment well," Zenobia said. She rose from her throne, and the entire court stood with her. For too long, the East has served Rome's interests while receiving nothing in return. Our wealth has flowed westward to fill Roman coffers. Our people have died in Roman wars. No more. She descended the steps of the dais, moving among her courtiers with confident grace. "We will build a new order in the East. Palmyra will be the center of a realm where Greek learning, Eastern wisdom, and desert strength combine. We will be neither Rome nor Persia, but something greater than both." From Zenobia, Queen of the East, to Aurelian Augustus, she dictated to her scribes, crafting a message of characteristic defiance. "You demand my surrender, as though you were not aware that Cleopatra preferred to die a queen, rather than remain alive, however high her rank. As night fell over Palmyra, Zenobia stood alone on the palace roof, gazing at the stars that had guided desert caravans for centuries. Her empire stretched farther than she could see, a realm carved from Rome's weakness by her own strength. But somewhere, far to the west, a new emperor was consolidating his power, and Zenobia knew that Aurelian would not allow her challenge to go unanswered forever. By 272 AD, the storm that Zenobia had long anticipated finally broke upon her empire. Emperor Aurelian, having secured his western frontiers, turned his full attention eastward. His legions marched relentlessly toward Palmyra, recapturing territory after territory. Roman forces clashed with Zenobia's in a series of battles, each one bringing Aurelian closer to her desert capital. In her war council, surrounded by maps and reports from the front lines, Zenobia faced the grim reality of Rome's advance. "We have lost Antioch," General Zabdas reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Aurelian's tactics were unexpected. His cavalry feigned retreat, drawing our heavy cataphracts into a pursuit that exhausted their horses. When our cavalry could fight no more, the Romans turned and destroyed them. Zenobia's face remained impassive, though her heart pounded with fear for the first time in years. "And our infantry? I withdrew them before they could suffer the same fate," Zabdas answered. "But our armies are retreating all along the front. Aurelian marches faster than any Roman commander I have ever faced. He allows his men no rest, driving them forward day and night." Zenobia hoped the vast desert surrounding Palmyra would protect her from the invader who had stripped her of her empire. For Aurelian, the challenge was moving 6 legions, perhaps 40,000 men with all their equipment, siege engines, and supplies across 140 kilometers of empty desert, a 3-day journey. Despite harassment from Bedouin raiders loyal to Zenobia, he nevertheless completed the march and surrounded the city. As night fell, Zenobia stood on the city walls, watching the Roman campfires illuminate the desert horizon. Their number shocked her, a vast constellation of lights stretching beyond sight. She had underestimated Aurelian's resolve and resourcefulness. Swallowing her pride, Zenobia sent urgent pleas to Persia, seeking help against their mutual enemy. But Shapur, Persia's great king, lay on his deathbed, and his ministers were more concerned with the coming succession struggle than with Palmyra's fate. They would let Rome and Palmyra exhaust each other in battle. Returning to her palace, Zenobia found her son Vabilathus waiting, his young face pinched with worry. "The Romans are surrounding us, mother. Everyone is frightened." Zenobia knelt before him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Fear is for those without courage, my son. We are descended from warriors. Palmyra has stood against the desert for 1,000 years. It will not fall to Rome." But as she held her child, Zenobia knew that her empire was crumbling. The dream she had built was slipping through her fingers like desert sand. Now, she could only prepare for the final confrontation with the man who had come to destroy everything she had created. The Romans laid siege to Palmyra, but Zenobia remained confident that her archers and cavalry could repel them. If direct combat failed, perhaps the Romans would succumb to hunger and the merciless desert climate. Days turned to weeks as the summer sun beat down on besiegers and besieged alike. Water became more precious than gold within the city walls, rationed carefully among soldiers and civilians. From her command post atop the city's highest tower, Zenobia watched Roman sappers working to undermine Palmyra's eastern wall. Her engineers had reinforced the defenses, but each day, the Romans came closer to breaking through. "My queen," Zabdas approached, his once proud frame now gaunt from weeks of constant battle. "The water reserves are critically low. We have perhaps 5 days left, even with severe rationing." Zenobia's jaw tightened. "And our food supplies?" "Better, but without water." She nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Thirst would defeat her people before starvation had the chance. The desert that had always protected Palmyra now threatened to become its undoing. That night, Zenobia called her closest advisors to a secret council. "We cannot defeat Aurelian from behind these walls," she told them. "Each day weakens us while the Romans grow stronger. They have established supply lines across the desert, an achievement I would have thought impossible." "What do you propose, my queen?" asked Longinus, his philosopher's brow furrowed with concern. Zenobia's eyes flashed with determination. "Too proud to surrender, I will take my son and flee to Persia. Once there, I can raise another army and return to fight when Aurelian has departed." The plan was set in motion immediately. Under cover of darkness, Zenobia, Vabalithus, and a small group of loyal guards slipped out through a hidden tunnel beneath the city walls. Mounted on the fastest camels in her stables, they rode eastward toward the Euphrates River, beyond which lay Persian territory and the possibility of salvation. But in her desperation, the queen had not reckoned with Aurelian's vigilance. Roman scouts spotted the escaping party before they reached the Euphrates. In a swift pursuit, Aurelian's cavalry overtook them at the river's edge. Zenobia was captured just as she prepared to cross to safety. With news of their queen's captivity, Palmyra soon surrendered. In the Roman camp, Zenobia stood before Aurelian, meeting the emperor's gaze with defiant dignity. He was not what she had expected, no towering giant of legend, but a weathered soldier with keen eyes that evaluated her as one might appraise a valuable but dangerous possession. "The Queen of Palmyra," Aurelian said, circling her slowly. "Or should I say, the Empress of the East. You have led me on quite a chase across your realm, Zenobia." "A realm that should never have been Rome's," she replied, her voice steady despite her fear. Aurelian smiled thinly. "And yet, here we are. Your empire has fallen. Your armies are defeated. Your beautiful city lies at my mercy." He stopped directly before her. "The question now is what to do with you." Zenobia was marched away across the burning desert and displayed at the Hippodrome in Antioch, seated astride a camel for all to see. From there, she began the long journey to Rome, awaiting whatever punishment her conqueror would devise. While her advisors and friends paid the ultimate price for her rebellion, many, including the philosopher Longinus and General Zabdas, were tried and executed. Zenobia herself was spared. The journey to Rome took months, crossing deserts, mountains, and finally the Mediterranean Sea. Zenobia and her son were kept under constant guard, treated not with cruelty, but with the careful attention given to valuable political prizes. They traveled in a caravan of wagons bearing other captives and treasures from Palmyra, statues, gold, precious fabrics, all destined to display Rome's victory over the East. On a rain-swept evening in a military encampment in southern Gaul, Zenobia sat in her tent, listening to the guards speaking Latin outside. They thought she couldn't understand them, but her education served her still. "The emperor wants her alive for his triumph," one said. "The first woman to challenge Rome since Cleopatra." "She doesn't look like much now," replied another. "Hard to believe she ruled half the eastern provinces." Zenobia closed her eyes, letting their words wash over her. She had expected death when captured, had almost welcomed it. Instead, Aurelian had chosen this lingering humiliation. Each day took her farther from her homeland, from the desert she loved, from everything that had made her Zenobia. Vabalithus entered the tent, returning from his daily supervised walk. At 12, he was trying desperately to maintain the dignity of a king while being treated as a prisoner. "Mother," he whispered, sitting beside her. "One of the centurions told me that Father's palace in Palmyra has been looted. All the treasures are being taken to Rome." Zenobia drew her son close. "The greatest treasure of Palmyra sits beside me now," she said softly. "Buildings can be rebuilt, gold can be mined again, But you, my son, are irreplaceable. What will happen to us in Rome? He asked, his voice small in the darkness. Zenobia had no answer. After her capture, she had been taken to Emesa and questioned by Aurelian himself. Roman sources differed on her response. Some claimed she had tried to blame her generals and advisors, while others described her as remaining proudly defiant. The truth, as always, lay somewhere between. "We will survive," she told her son, the only certainty she could offer. "We are of the desert, and the desert endures all storms." As their journey continued toward Rome, Zenobia felt herself changing. The queen who had ruled an empire was becoming something else, a symbol, a trophy, a living reminder of Rome's reach. And somewhere within that transformation, she began to see a path forward that she had never imagined possible. The day of Aurelian's triumph finally arrived. Zenobia was shackled with heavy gold chains and dressed in jewel-sewn robes so weighty that a slave had to help support their burden. She was made to walk before Aurelian's bejeweled chariot, which was pulled by 4 magnificent stags through the streets of Rome. The city was unlike anything Zenobia had ever seen, larger, grander, more overwhelming than even Alexandria or Antioch. Temples and palaces of marble rose on every hill. Aqueducts carried water across impossible distances. And everywhere, people, more people than she had imagined could exist in one place, all gathered to witness her humiliation. The triumph lasted from dawn until dusk, a spectacular parade featuring elephants, giraffes, tigers, captured enemy chariots, and mountains of looted treasure. Long lines of enemy soldiers walked with hands bound behind them. But it was Zenobia who drew the most attention, the desert queen who had thought herself equal to Cleopatra. The crowds gazed and shouted at her with a mixture of derision and pity. As the procession reached the forum, Zenobia caught sight of her son being led in a separate part of the parade. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd, a mother and child united in defeat, but still unbroken. She straightened her back, refusing to bow under the weight of the chains or the stares of Rome. When the triumph ended, Zenobia expected execution, the fate of most defeated enemies paraded through Rome. But Aurelian, who had used severe measures against other rivals, chose a different path for her. Sources suggest she was granted a villa at Tibur, modern Tivoli, and allowed to live in relative comfort, with privileges similar to those of a Roman matron. The villa sat on a hillside overlooking a valley, surrounded by gardens and fountains. It was beautiful, but alien to a woman of the desert, too green, too damp, too confined. In those first weeks, Zenobia paced its perimeter like a caged lioness, searching for escape routes that did not exist. Zosimus, a later historian, suggested that Zenobia was put on trial in Rome, but acquitted of the charges against her. Following her acquittal, she settled into life in the villa and eventually became the wife of a Roman noble. Whether this marriage was forced or a calculated decision on Zenobia's part, history does not clearly record. What is certain is that the former queen of Palmyra, once the most powerful woman in the East, found herself transformed into a curiosity for Roman society, an exotic former enemy now neutralized and absorbed into the very empire she had challenged. Years passed. Aurelian, apparently impressed by Zenobia's dignity and intelligence, had granted her an elegant villa in Tibur, where she lived in luxury. The warrior queen who had once led armies became a prominent philosopher and socialite in Roman society. Her knowledge of Eastern culture and languages made her valuable to Romans conducting trade with the provinces she had once ruled. According to some accounts, Zenobia married a Roman senator, whose name has been lost to history. They had several daughters who married into noble Roman families, ensuring that the blood of Palmyra's greatest queen would flow through the veins of future generations of Roman aristocracy. On a warm autumn evening, 20 years after her capture, an aging Zenobia sat in the garden of her villa, watching the sunset paint the Italian hills with the same golden light that had once bathed Palmyra's columns. Beside her sat her son Vaballathus, now a man of 32, dressed in the toga of a Roman citizen rather than the robes of an Eastern king. "News from the East," he said, handing her a letter. "Palmyra is being rebuilt. The new governor has restored the Temple of Bel." Zenobia took the letter, her once regal hands now showing the first signs of age. "Rome always rebuilds what it destroys," she said quietly. "It is how they make conquered lands forget they were ever free." "Have you forgotten, mother?" Vaballathus asked, studying her face. Zenobia smiled faintly. "Never. But I have learned what Rome never understood about Palmyra, that true strength lies in endurance, not domination." She gestured to the villa around them. "They thought this luxury was mercy, that sparing my life was kindness. They never realized that by letting me live, they allowed Palmyra's spirit to survive as well." While some accounts claim Zenobia committed suicide after her defeat, this is considered unlikely. Her descendants reportedly survived into the 4th century and beyond. Prominent Romans traced their lineage back to the Queen of Palmyra, with evidence supported by inscriptions found in Rome itself. As night fell, Zenobia walked the paths of her garden alone. In the darkness, if she closed her eyes, she could almost imagine herself back in the palace at Palmyra, planning conquests and dreaming of empire. But when she opened them, the Italian moonlight reminded her of where fate had led her. Rome had decided that death was too kind for the queen who challenged their power. Instead, they had given her life a different life than she had imagined, but one in which she had found unexpected purpose. In Rome's attempt to erase her legacy, they had instead ensured its survival. While her empire had fallen, Zenobia herself had endured, adapting like the desert plants that bloom after rare rains. The story of Zenobia's life was transmitted to later generations through histories that presented the Queen of Palmyra as an honorable and worthy adversary of Rome, a great heroine of the ancient world. And this is how she is still remembered in the present day. In the end, perhaps this was Zenobia's greatest victory. Not the territories she conquered or the armies she led, but the legend she became. Rome had decided death was too kind for Zenobia, never realizing that in sparing her life, they had granted her immortality.